Hi, this story is called Samuel. It's from a book called When the Lights Go Out by Margaret MacDonald. Samuel Beckett was a mean, dirty, rotten old man. He was the kind of man who lied and cheated and stole from his neighbors and chased kids out of his yard with a baseball bat, and nobody liked him. So it wasn't a big surprise to anybody when one day Samuel's house burned down, and Samuel burned up with it. Well, it wasn't a surprise to anybody except for Samuel, because he woke up the next morning and found out he was a ghost, and he was doomed to walk the earth, wailing and moaning and dragging heavy chains behind him. Well, Samuel was ornery enough to like scaring people, so for a while he didn't mind being a ghost. But after about 100 years, he got real tired. Decided he didn't want to be a ghost anymore, so he went to the other ghosts and said, "How can I stop being a ghost?" And they all told him the same thing. There's only one way to stop being a ghost, and you don't want to do it. Because you have to find the deepest, darkest, scariest graveyard on the face of the earth, and you have to go there on midnight on Halloween night and find the Great Worm. And you gotta take your mortal remains with you and let him eat them. Well, that scared Samuel aplenty. He didn't want to find anything called a great worm, and he surely didn't want to have his body eaten up, and then he remembered he didn't have a body anyhow, because it burned up in the fire. Well, he didn't know for sure what he could do, so he decided to go on being a ghost, and for another 100 years he moaned and wailed and rattled, until finally, after 200 years had gone by, he was so tired he just couldn't stand it anymore, and he decided to do it. So he waited till Halloween night, and after midnight he went to the deepest, darkest, scariest graveyard on the face of the earth, and he found the Great Worm. Now, if you think I'm going to describe the Great Worm to you, you're wrong, because it would be so terrifying that you would scream and run out of this room. But let me tell you, it was a fearsome sight. And Samuel slowly moaned and wailed and clanked his way up to the Great Worm, and he was a-shivering so hard all his chains were clanking and cranking together, and finally he threw himself down on the ground and said, "Okay, eat me!" Well, the Great Worm slithered forward, and it snuffled all over Samuel with its big old slimy jaws, and then it said, "Samuel, where is thy body? I cannot eat thee unless thy body is here." And Samuel said to the worm, "I'm sorry, I ain't got no dead body, no mortal remains, 'cause they all burned up in my house fire." And the Great Worm just shook its head and said, "Then bring me thy ashes, for I cannot eat thee unless thy mortal remains are here." So poor Samuel had to go back to the town where he died, find the foundation of his burned down house, and start digging around and sifting through the dirt for his ashes. And it took him a whole year. But by the time next Halloween came around, Samuel was ready, and he went back to the deep, dark, scary graveyard and found the Great Worm, laid the ashes before it in a pile, and said, "All right, now, eat me!" And the Great Worm took its big slimy snout and snuffled all over those ashes and said, "Samuel, it's not all here. Where is thy right arm?" "I don't know," said Samuel. "I got all the ashes I could find. How do I know where the right arm is?" But the Great Worm just shook its head and said, "You gotta go back and find it, 'cause I cannot eat thee unless it's all here." So Samuel had to go back and spend another year combing through the dirt and the ashes of the house fire and sifting out the house ashes from what he thought was his ashes, and finally he found what he thought were the ashes of his right arm. And he took it back to the graveyard again and laid it before the worm and said, "All right, now eat me." And the Great Worm sniffled and snuffled all over those ashes and then said, "Samuel, it is still not here. Where is thy right thumbnail?" And Samuel said, "What? Are you kidding me? A thumbnail? Come on, aren't you being a little bit picky?" But the Great Worm said, "Samuel, find me thy right thumbnail. I cannot eat thee unless it is all here." Well, Samuel went back to that house, and he searched and searched and searched all through the remains of that house, and he searched everywhere, all around the town, and even all over the face of the earth. But he has never been able to find that right thumbnail. So be careful when you're out trick-or-treating or walking around on Halloween night, 'cause if it's dark enough and scary enough, somebody might just sneak up behind you and grab you and try to take the thumbnail off your right hand. But if that happens, you just turn around and say, "Samuel, be gone! That thumbnail's mine, it is not thine." And Samuel